Welcome to Believe in Chargers with Lorenzo Neal. Matt Money Smith here, as you can see there on the screen. If you're watching, if you're listening, very excited because not only do we have the head coach that we discussed on the last pod, Lorenzo, but now we know kind of what the dynamic is when it comes to team building. Joe Hortiz, hired away from the Ravens, got his start there in 1998, and this is, to me, the absolute perfect candidate to pair with Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, somebody that has worked closely with his brother John and someone that has worked in every single facet of a front office when it comes to team building, from a regional scout, an area scout, to the national scouting director, to pro personnel, to director of player personnel. Joe Ortiz has overseen everything when it comes. The only thing he hasn't had, low, is the title of GM.
Right.
But otherwise, he's been the guy in Baltimore for 25 years.
He has, and personally, I like Joe Ortiz as a person of football, but also just a good man. I remember having some encounters with Joe Ortiz my time in Baltimore, and as well as when my son was going through this process of being injured and and not being able to be drafted and things that happened. I remember picking up the phone and Joe was saying, "Hey, how they like my son Lorenzo, maybe to come into Baltimore." But he's just been a guy that you just open communication, and I'm telling you, he knows what it takes. He likes tough guys. You see the kind of organization Baltimore is. They're going to get tough guys. They're going to get guys that can play the game, guys that are durable. So I think that you have a GM that is, like you just said, that is won on every level, that's been around every level, that understands from the scouting department, from front office department. This guy is very versatile in the football arena, and you needed to bring in a guy of Joe Ortiz ilk, because you're in a situation where this team, the Chargers organization, they want to build for some success and start getting not just those corner pieces. Some of them they have, of course, they're Justin Herbert. But now you're saying, I want to change culture and do it with the durability of bringing in the right people that's going to help continue to change this culture.
And I love that you have that personal experience with him, Low, and you can speak to that because that's important. The one thing that really ahead of everything else, especially when it came down to the final two candidates, Brandon Brown and Joe Ortiz, when it appeared as though, okay, well, those are the only two that are getting the second interview, so it looks as though it's between these two. The one thing that this signals to me is that Jim Harbaugh is not demanding complete control. If Brandon Brown would have been the hire, I would have said, okay, it's someone who's never really done a whole lot of scouting. We got look at this. We got a third member of the broadcast. I love it.
There's
Uh,
Dexter.
hey, get them dogs barking because we got some dogs on this team now. But what it sends, the message that it sends to me, you know what? There's only one bad thing about your dog being in this shot, Low, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way. He is so much better looking than you.
Yes.
Like he is so much better looking
hey,
than you're the
hey,
ugliest guy in that frame right now, man.
hey, Matt. Hey, Matt. I love that I can just divert, and you're like, "What is Lowe coming up with next?" And all of a sudden, you're like, "What's going on?" And all of a sudden,
Yeah,
dog's in the couch, and he rises up. You're like, "Okay, how can I keep this together and not letting
yeah,
our audience understand what just happened and how it just appeared?" You're
yeah.
like, I can't just not. I
Oh yeah,
just can't go by this." But yeah, he is very good looking,
that's a
and
good
that's
looking
why I
dog
brought
right
him
there.
in. We got some dogs. We talked about we needed some dogs on this Charger team. Guess what? Joe is going to go get the dogs,
Yeah,
and that's why I'm bringing out my dog.
there we go. But as I was saying, the thing that it signals to me is that if Harbaugh wanted control, if he wanted to make all the decisions, and it's nothing against Brandon Brown, but it's someone that was a. I mean, you know what pro personnel is. It's not. You're not a director of player personnel. You're not director of college scouting. Like that's where you're really making your bones. You're an area scout. You're a regional scout. You're a national scout. Brandon obviously I was certainly impressive in his interviews. Got a law degree, former player. I'm sure the resume is impressive. But when I see Joe Ortiz be hired, now I see someone that Harbaugh wants to collaborate with, that he's going to trust, that when it comes to this process, look, you know how far ahead of this Joe is than Jim Harbaugh when it comes to the draft? I mean, this is someone that's probably already got their board built, at least has a ton of stuff already set aside for Baltimore and what they're going to do in the draft. And this is something that Coach Harbaugh can now rely on, can work with. And I would guess, if I had to guess, Low, he's probably going to say, hey, Joe, outside of season, you got to take the reins. You got to run this thing. Now, when we get in season and I'm telling you what I need, and like that's when I take control. That's kind of how I envision this probably working out.
I think you're spot on, Matt, because when you're thinking about what Joe Ortiz can bring to the table and what Harbaugh brings to the table, it's similar and same, but yet different in their own right. And what you just talked about, and that's what Harbaugh needs. He needs a guy that he can trust. That the word that you just said, trust. That's huge because Harbaugh wants to be able to say, let me go focus on getting this team the X's and O's, getting this team in the places they need to be where we can get victories. But I'm going to trust that you're going to get me the talent that I need that I can put on this field. And Joe Ortiz, you've seen what he's done in Baltimore. He's going to get Hardball the talent. And that's what Hardball does a great job of doing, is developing. See, I remember guys say, hey, I want a teacher. Exactly. Hardball's a teacher, and he understands when you have the right talent for him, you look at the productivity that he gets out of these athletes because of the fact he says, okay, you're there, but you're raw. Let me build. Let me give you the tools for you to have success. That's what I like so much about this combination is because you got that trust factor, you got that belief factor, and you have a culture factor that both of these guys are going to say, look, that's his sandbox. This is my sandbox, but we can both come together in each half of our sandbox to get a perfect remedy for success for this Chargers organization.
Yeah, it's the famous Bill Parcells line, if you're doing the cooking, you want to shop for the groceries. Yeah, unless you don't have time to shop for the groceries and you don't know what groceries you're supposed to get because it was too tough and you're doing too many other things that you couldn't get the recipe committed to memory. And when you were there, you kind of botched it up and now you don't have the right ingredients. So I understand what he's saying, which is why you need to find that partnership. It is a
Right.
lot as someone that works the Chargers broadcast. We do it with Daniel Jeremiah and DJ. He's incredible. He's the best in the business when it comes to getting everything ready for the draft and in the media. Um, I see how much work he puts into it. We'll be on a plane across the country. We'll be flying across the country, and this guy might get 10 guys done. Maybe 10, like I'm talking going from here to Boston, here to New
Wow.
York or something. That's how deep he's going into tape and getting his notes with his 6-color pen and trying to break these things. It is months and months of work when you're trying to put this stuff together. Now, granted, they have a staff, right? You got Kevin
Sure.
Kelly and
Sure.
you've got all the
Sure.
scouts. But at the same time, for coach to come in, and you talked about this, I think you talked about this last week, Lo, like the Chargers going to have an advantage as well. It's not just the players on Michigan, but it's all the teams that he faced and all those different players that he had a chance to scout in person while he was coaching Michigan and prepping his team. It's Washington, it's Alabama, it's Ohio State, it's all of the Big Ten opponents that he had throughout the course, and maybe some undrafted free agents that our people didn't know about that maybe made a play or flashed, and there was something there. Like Coach Harbaugh is certainly going to be able to contribute to that along with his staff. But I just love that they bring in someone that is part of an organization that is. I don't think there's much pushback. That's been the toughest team in the league for the last 20 years.
Yes.
I don't think anybody would
Yes.
push back on that.
Yes, absolutely. And to add to your point, you're talking about a guy that's been around the game, not just in the college level, but the high school level, because Harbaugh understands, hey, look, this is, and you say, well, what does that have to do with the pros? Because guys now in high school are getting ready to go to college. Harbaugh's already in the pros. But what it is that carryover, like you're saying, you have two guys that has to stay around the game. Joe Ortiz has to be around the college game to understand that, hey, I want to make these transition. Harbaugh's played against a lot of these guys. He'll know. Joe might say, hey, this guy looks pretty good. What do you think? Harbaugh can say, yeah, he's not a knee bender. I like him, but he gets stuck. Sort of like a guy like Case. You watch him, Chase Daniels play, for the Niners, watching him stiff, can't do certain things. You look at certain guys, maybe Harbaugh can identify and tell, be able to tell Joe that. So you're gonna
Yeah.
have that, and you're gonna have the carryover that some high school guys, that are now, that are going to be in college, that Harbaugh's, hey, I remember that watching that guy. Hey, this is what. So you're going to have a collective two guys that's been around, that's fresh, that are in the game. Because, like you said, when the season goes, Harbaugh can't be concentrated on, looking at college players. He's got to concentrate on this team. But what he will have is still have the ability, because he's fresh out of the college scene, that I think it's going to give the Chargers a huge advantage, because they have two guys that are running this ship, that is leading this new organization, that already been around the college level.
Yeah, I'll tell you the one thing that is, we've been talking about these 4 big contracts repeatedly, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. And I'll tell you, the one thing that jumps out at me is, and I could be completely wrong, but if you told me I had to pick one of those guys, you can only pick one that you can put your name on and you think they're going to keep. I think I put it on Keenan Allen, just because I think about how hard and how much Baltimore has struggled to find that number 1 receiver, and what a challenge it had been for that. The fact that they paid Odell Beckham $16 million this year to be essentially a part-time player, had a couple
Right.
great games, but to come in and say, okay, I know he's 32, but the guy just produces. All he does is get first down and catch balls and pile up yards. He's good in the red zone. Like, to me, that's to me, Keenan is a Jim Harbaugh kind of player too, right? It's tough yards. He blocks as a receiver. He gets into the middle of the field and squats and is willing to take those hits for those first downs. So, like, that's the one thing that jumped out at me. Like, when you go through, and I've got it all right here, so I'll be looking off screen a little bit, but when you look at what the Ravens have done so well when it comes to drafting and developing defensive linemen, offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, they are so good at that. And the Chargers need all of them. But, like, so what's the one thing they've kind of missed on? Wide receivers. I know they just got Zay because the Chargers passed on him, and that was great. But, like, Rashad Bateman, and you just kind of think back, there's they've struggled. Duvernay, they already traded Hollywood Brown after just a couple years. So that's the one thing I think. If you tell me, hey, we got to figure this out, we can only keep one, which one are you going to keep? And also the rapport with, and you know how important that is to have a quarterback wide receiver tandem that just, a battery that are just in concert, that know what the other one's thinking all the time and can find themselves in the right place at the right time and make sure they take care of each other. So that's the other thing that jumped out at me is.
Oh, I can totally see that, Money, because when you're talking about Keenan, what he is, and he's still durable, but the biggest, he finally stayed healthy because he's had some injury problems the last couple of years. But you look at his productivity, and that's what Harbaugh's going to look at. The guy is still playing at an extremely high level. You see the way that he did this year. This guy was pretty awesome and pretty prolific this year. And the way that he understands concepts, how to get open, where to sit, the physicality that he brings to the table, everything that you're saying says, you know what, if Harbaugh has to keep a guy and still going to maybe overpay, that's a guy, because he also wants his quarterback comfortable. He also wants his quarterback in a place that he feels, who is his safety blanket. And if you think about a lot of different guys, a lot of different receivers, you watch their body language in a tough situation. If things aren't going away. Keenan's not that way. Keenan and Justin Herbert have a great relationship and a great kindred spirit that you see these guys can work together. Sometimes when you have a young quarterback and you have a veteran or older receiver, you have seen sometimes where the quarterback, now he's forced to do other things that he don't want to do. He'll force some balls in a tough situation because, he doesn't want the guy mad at him. You look no further than, look at a team that played very, very well this year was the Green Bay Packers. What happened? And no disrespect, because I love Fresno State, my guy Fresno State, who plays with the Raiders, a great receiver, but at times, Devontae Adams. But you saw this year, because Green Bay, young quarterback, had some no-name receivers, the quarterback doesn't get caught up in these names and guys that he has to throw the ball to, and you mix it up and you can be more diverse. And that's what I think that you have in Keenan. Even though he's an older veteran player, he understands the concept, and it's not about him and his stats. It's about winning.
Yeah, and just going to that point, that was one of the real refreshing things about Justin Herbert's rookie season is you would think as a rookie, he was going to force balls to Keenan, and that was not the case. Now, don't get me wrong, Keenan was the number one guy. He was targeted most, but when you looked at the box score at the end of the year, when you looked at the stats, you had Jalen Guyton, undrafted, who had probably 3 or 4 touchdowns, 400 yards. T. Billy, Teron Johnson, that had probably 2 touchdowns, 400 yards. Hunter Henry was a big target. Mike Williams was a big target. Josh Palmer, as a rookie, was coming out. Like, you had, actually, Josh Palmer wasn't there yet, but like, he spread it around. He did not care. He did not care what the name on the back of the jersey was. Shane Steichen drew it up, and Herbert would go out and execute it. And the thing, and also I think and the reason why I would struggle to see both of those receivers back, Mike and Keenan, and you're probably going to have to pick. Just think about the style of football they're going to play. They're going to play a much more run heavy, 2 tight ends, maybe 6 offensive linemen. We need to get a fullback on this roster.
Yes.
They're going to play a much different style of football. So I don't know if committing 30, they're going to have to change the contracts, but what stands right now, $64 million to 2 wide receivers, it just doesn't quite make sense with the style of play. So I think you end up redoing Keenan's contract, put some voidable years on the back end and figure that out down the line, but convert some to signing bonus, drop that number from 32 to somewhere around 13, 14. And that's how you make it work. But that to me, just because of the struggles that they've had in Baltimore and identifying and trying desperately to find that number one receiver, that's one that I would assume they don't want to move on. And when I go through and I've got, the last handful of years, and even if you just go historically low to what they do, I mean, you're talking, and you know what else they draft really well is corners, and God knows we need corners on this team. But like Isaiah Likely was a 4th-round pick. Mark Andrews, 3rd-round pick at tight end. Kohler, 4th-round pick at tight end. And you go through and you look at games started and you look at touchdowns and yards. They spread it out. And when we talk about Joe Hortiz, like you go all the way back, I'm going to dig deep. And maybe you were there low at the time, but you're talking about the year they drafted 2 tight ends in the same draft. It was Pitta, and I wish I got to try to dig it up here. They drafted 2 dudes in like the 2nd and the 3rd round. Exactly. So like this is an organization. He comes from an organization, and that's how it is. Some place, like, look, the Steelers are really good at getting receivers in the 2nd round. Like when you go through certain organizations, they just do a really good job of scouting specific positions. And the Ravens have done a really good job scouting O-linemen, scouting D-linemen. And, heck, you know what? They do a good job of scouting everything except wide receivers. That's the only thing.
That is a position that's just eluded them. I mean, remember they went out and had to be with their Derek Mason. That wasn't a guy they recruited. That was a guy through free agency. So they have missed big on when you're talking about just receivers. So I think that you're going to have that. But the physical talent, what you're talking about is just the physical aspect of the football game. Because football, you can't play basketball on the grass on a consistent basis and throw it all around and think you're going to win consistently. Let no further that's who's playing in the Super Bowl. Kansas City Chiefs, they said, Mahomes, he's finesse. I'm telling you, they've been physical. You look at Pacheco, you look at the way they run downhill. You look at times they just say line up, and they went out and played against the bully in Baltimore, and they ran the ball, not to just ran up and down, but they stayed with it. You have to have that physical point. You look at Detroit, you look at the Niners, you look at a lot of these teams, you still have to run the ball, and you have to run it with a physical type of back. And that's what's going to be interesting. I know we're talking about receivers and Keenan can block. That's what I think that the focus is always going to be, is to make sure they have a back that is going to be physical. Harbaugh is going to get someone. He had Frank Gore. He had guys that's going to be physical. He's going to get it back. That's going to get him 3 to 4 yards, and then they get that extra, so be it. But he wants a chain mover that's going to keep those defenses on, that's make you have to play 8, 9 guys in the box for, like you talked about, the percentage rate will go up in the passing game because of what you have to commit to the run. If not, they'll run you out of the stadium.
Yeah, and I think as I'm looking at the the Ravens depth chart, and you look at how they're built, there's a lot of offensive line that's been drafted, and that's why I think as excited as we get, and I don't think they can go wrong if they stick and pick, and it's Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze at the wide receiver position. If they go if they go Brock Bowers at tight end because he's a George Kittle type, and Harbaugh and everybody just kind of see that as essential to what they want to do in terms of blocking and being a weapon as a pass catcher, being able to do both. No problem there. If they go with the tackle, they go with Joe Alt, or if they go with Fashanu, or, one of the other tackles, no problem there as well. I think ultimately, though, given their druthers, if they could pull it off, if there's a way to trade down this draft, is particularly deep at both of those positions that I think they would probably draft there, wide receiver and tackle. Rarely do you have deep tackle drafts. You end up having one or two at the top. They go right away. But like that would probably be best case, especially if you're going to rip that Band-Aid off and get rid of three or four of the, all four or three of these four big contracts and have to fill those holes. And that's something that Baltimore's been comfortable doing. I mean, when you look at rookies played, their rookies play. Patrick Queen was plugged in at linebacker and played. Orlando Brown was drafted and played at tackle. Zay Flowers this year was their number one receiver. Mark Andrews, Hayden Hurst came in the same year. They both played as two tight ends their rookie year. So they are going to expect their rookies to play. And it's not just your first round pick. Like, that's the thing about the draft. And that's why getting someone like Hortiz is so big, just because of all the experience he has. The one thing that's been a bit of an issue for the Chargers, and I love Tom Telesco, just an awesome dude, but the one thing that they tended to have an issue with was that rounds 3 and 4, the 2, 3, 4. The 2, 3, 4 were a bit of an issue where you got it. The second round out, don't get me wrong. This year, it was great. Thule. A couple years ago, you know what? Just draft defensive linemen because Chenna was awesome. Nwosu, just draft defensive linemen out of USC as your second round picks. But that's where you make your bones. You play it safe, hit doubles in the first round. Don't take swings for the fences. You can't afford to miss out on those guys because of the 50-year option and what that means to your salary cap situation. But man, you got to hit more doubles in the second, third, that's that day 2 and that first part of day 3. And that's something the Ravens have done a heck of a job at. And that's something they're going to have to do here because they do need to get some more depth on this roster.
Yeah, you need depth. And Harbaugh's a big guy on special teams. You know that. Harbaugh, I mean, he wants to make sure. So he's going to get a lot of young guys. And you're going to say, look, we want you to play now. And that's what this is. This is not tough. This is going to be developed. And this is by trial by fire. Harbaugh's going to have a couple years. We know that he isn't going anywhere. So he's going to build a bully. You give him the tools that he needs. And now you got a GM that thinks the same way. They're going to build a bully. The AFC West is different now. You're going to build a bully. You look at Pierce, who he is with the Raiders. He's trying to build a bully, physical type of deal. Harbaugh, physical. So you have two coaches that are bullies. They're going to try to build bullies. But Harbaugh has a huge edge in developing quarterbacks. His coaching staff's going to be a lot different. So you're going to be in a situation where the Chargers, it's not something that you expect, okay, a couple years to get better. You expect the instant gratification because you and I both, the last several years, we know this team should have been in the playoffs and have deep runs, and it didn't happen, especially when you have a quarterback. When you have a quarterback, winning teams. Buffalo didn't play great, but they had a quarterback. Minnesota, they had a quarterback to carry them in. Look at Minnesota, Cousins get hurt. They still had a limping chance. You look at the teams that usually get in that are fighting for it. The team may not be great, but they get in because of the quarterback you have. And the Chargers didn't get in spite of having a quarterback. So this is usually the exception, not the rule. So we got to start being a part of the rule that, hey, look, if you have a quarterback, you're going to be fighting to get into playoffs. You look around the league, Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrows go down. They're out. But you think about when you have a guy of that ilk, especially at the quarterback position, you usually try to find your way. And that's what Harbaugh is going to do because the mentality of building a bully is coming to LA. And I'm telling you, Matt, you know it and I know it. You're getting ready to change the way people view the Chargers because of their change of play.
Yeah, you look at the Chiefs. They didn't win that game because of offense. They won that game because they scored 17 points. The fact that the Ravens couldn't beat them at home and their defense only allowed 17 points because the Chiefs defense was that good. Spagnuolo and Brent Veach and Andy Reid have built a bully. You just said it. I'll just take the same word, and they're young. You look at the middle of that field with Bolton on the line with Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie. I had hoped the Chargers were going to draft him. He's a local kid out of Bosco High School up to Washington, but they took a pass on him. Like, he's already one of the best corners in the league. This was his second year. You got Jerry Sneed. Like, that is Willie Gay at the linebacker position. Obviously, Chris Jones is
Oh,
I mean, it
he's the
sounds
best. He's
blasphemous,
the
but
best. He,
he may have passed Aaron. He may have passed Aaron Donald.
I'm
As
with you.
Aaron Donald gets on in years. So you got to build. It's going to be a fist fight, and you're going to have to build. And we know what that secondary in Denver looks like. We know what that linebacker level in Denver looks like. I know their defensive line needs to get rebuilt a little bit after they whiffed on Gregory and got rid of help me out, went down to Miami,
Oh
Bradley
yeah,
Chubb. So
yeah,
like
Chubb.
but at the same time, it's becoming a much more physical division. We know Max Crosby's probably the best end in the game. So like you've got to deal and contend with that. And so that's why I wouldn't be surprised if you see maybe some more action on that defensive side if they trade out. Maybe Dallas Turner, maybe they trade back to 10, then one of the quarterbacks slips, and now you got shoot, I'm trying to remember the name of I can't think of it. Travion. Anyway, you got the top corner out of Alabama or
Right.
the end. I mean, so that could be a direction they go as they continue. That's what you do. You build to win the division. It's the
Yeah.
easiest way to punch your ticket to the playoffs. You have the best record out of the four. You're guaranteed a ticket into the tournament. You don't have to worry about the wild card and tiebreakers and strength of schedule and all that sort of stuff. Just go win the division. You draft to win the division. And I think that's, the flip side of that, Lo, is the tackle. Is that, with these defensive lines, with Chris Jones and Karlaftis, with Max Crosby, you better be stout on your O-line. And that's why it never hurts to have that extra tackle and make sure you have a swing just in case, so you can protect and you can run. And I mean, there's a million different directions we can go. And
No.
as we get closer to the draft, we'll get deeper into it. But I think, as I just kind of give my final thought, I'm excited that it was Hortiz. He was the guy I wanted from the start. I think you build in the image of what his brother John's done in Baltimore. They've been a perennial contender year in and year out. I know there's just a single Super Bowl to show for it, but that's plenty. You get a
Yeah.
single Super Bowl for the
Yeah.
Chargers and a couple appearances in the championship round. That is plenty for me, and I'm very excited they got this guy coming to partner up with Coach Harbaugh.
I couldn't agree with you. In party, Mike, you're absolutely right. And all fans want is hope. They want hope to know that they're right there. They're tired of just getting. And like you said, if you get to the AFC Championship, you get in the playoffs, and it just gives you hope that okay, the next year we have a chance. That's what teams do. That's what you. It's a reason why the Steelers have had their guy for the last 10, 15 years, Mike Tomlin, because it's hope. It's a physicality. They're always going to find a way to compete. You never see this team lose 10, 11 games. They're always, even if they're not good, even if you know it's going to be early exit, you know what you're getting.
Right.
And at Baltimore, even it's going to be extra early exit and they're not favored, you know what you're getting. That's what we can't say about the Chargers. We did not know, and we do not know what you're getting. Now, you know what you're getting in Harbaugh. So now you can say, we know what we're going to be getting. We haven't been able to say that in LA with the Chargers in a long time. These other teams that we talk about, the Niners for the last 5 years, you know what you're getting. They might not win it, but you know they're going to find a way to be there in some capacity. That's what the Chargers faithful want.
Yeah, it's exciting because I think they're going to get it. I think it's a partnership that everything is in place. Look, you never know how things are going to break, injury luck, and all of those. And by the way, getting Ben Herbert, how about that? Best strength coach in the nation, picking him up.
Yes.
Jesse Minter, the
Huge.
best defensive coordinator in college. Like
Huge.
they aren't just spending money on Jim Harbaugh; they're spending money on everything. Herbert's the highest paid. He's the highest paid strength and conditioning, whatever the training.
Right.
Everybody's got a different name. Strength and training coordinators, whatever is strength coach. There you go.
Right.
Best in the nation. And I guarantee he's at least $1 million, if not $1.5 million to get that guy to leave Michigan and come here. Jesse Minter, minimum $2 million to get him out here to coordinate this defense. So they're spending money there. I just want to clean up my word salad. Dallas Turner is the end. and I don't know why Terrion Arnold, for some reason, I kept wanting to say Travion. Terrion Arnold.
I'm rubbing off on you, Matt. I'm rubbing off on you.
Out of Alabama. So we do those two defensively, but exciting time. We'll leave it at that. And as the pressure is coming up and as more of the staff fills out, by the time we do this again going to be even more excited about the direction they're going, with pass game coordinator, run game coordinator, if it's Greg Roman, whichever direction all this stuff goes. It's, man, it is shaping up to be a heck of an offseason for these Chargers when it comes to staff.
I can't wait. I'm excited too, Matt.
All right, we'll be back. Appreciate you all for checking out Believe in Chargers. It's just one episode of great news after another. Look, win games, be great. We'll worry about that in 2024. They couldn't do it in 2023, but at least it seems to be their win in the offseason, and we'll take that win.